Hey, here is the long promised video to a couple people. I had posted on Instagram probably a month ago. I'm so sorry. That is not a reflection of my work. I had posted on Instagram a month ago of if anybody had any suggestions on what they wanted to see on this kind of YouTube series. And someone had mentioned, like, what do we do for this? Like, we're not postpartum anymore, we're not perimenopause. And then coincidentally, I had a client call the other week of talking about perimenopause, and she really was like, you need to talk about this on your episode because a lot of what she's finding out is that the issues that she had during pregnancy and postpartum are now creeping back up to perimenopause and menopause era. And so I'll say like perimenopause and menopause is not my dive deep into. I have supported women in those phases of life. Again, I'm more of like a conception to postpartum plus, I call it. Um, but there are a lot of similarities and there are a lot of things that, just like I say, what happens postpartum in your mindset and like your nutrition and your behaviors is probably a reflection of how you thought of yourself and the behaviors that you had prior to pregnancy. And it's just postpartum makes those kind of even more exorbitant, right? So same thing with perimenopause and menopause is in a different way of the things that you experience prior to pregnancy and during pregnancy and through postpartum are more likely to be reflected in the postpartum era. So first things first, let's talk about like in this, we'll say postpartum plus to menopause transition phase is what are we looking at here? What can we expect with exercise and nutrition? So, exercise wise, strength training is still key and priority. Strength training is really important because as we're getting older, bones and muscle loss increases. And so, if we can help slow that, I don't want to say degeneration down, but slow that loss down, it's very helpful. Think of how do you get up off the floor. Think of putting something overhead in the airplane. Think of picking up your grandkids. Think of picking up things off the shelf from the supermarket. Like that all translates from strength training as well. And the stronger you feel, the more empowered you feel. So, strength training, you don't need to do it every day. If you haven't started, today's a great day to start. You can always start with body weight. Body weight is considered strength training. And even going from there, we can get body weight. Once we're comfortable, we can do resistance bands. We can get TRX, which is an easy thing. Most of the time, they have like a doorknob option where you don't need like a latch to hang it from. And then once you get comfortable, adjustable dumbbells or dumbbells. Then we go from there as the barbell. So strength training really does build on itself, not only in like types of movement, but forms of movement, meaning types of movement of like those different devices that you can use, but kind of the increase of weight, increase of skill, increase of time under tension. Um, there are different, we'll say, I don't know, celebrities, trender people that are more focused in this area. So Stacey Sims is one, Gabrielle Lyon, are like two of the big names kind of in that era. But really what's interesting is Stacey Sims talks about, and she's got a book called Roar. And she's honestly phenomenal to listen to on podcasts, but she really talks about the importance of strength training, lifting heavy. So like a 5x5 routine and what a 5x5 routine. So the less reps you have, the heavier the weight needs to be. So thinking if I have to move something 5 times compared to 15 times, that 5 times can be heavier. So she recommends really heavy lifting sessions, but then doing HIIT training as well. And in conjunction to that. Now, HIIT training is different than like Tabata training. When she talks about doing HIIT training, she's saying all out intensity, full rest. So full rest, like you just walked into the gym to do that one cycle again. Now it's really interesting because Jordan Syatt, who's another trainer in the sphere, who I've really come to appreciate lately, he was talking about Stacey Sims's method of working with somebody, and he's saying, somebody's not been training and they all of a sudden are starting to do like these HIIT routines, like that might not be the best tension for their bone health, right? So even just starting with walking is good. And it's interesting because so that you have these people who, for like on the training and the nutrition, and this is where it gets really scrambled for coaches, is you have the people who come from more of like the academic criteria, and then you have people who are, just trainers that came up to it, and they might have like advanced degrees or advanced certifications. And so sometimes they conflict. And sometimes the people say, I actually work with people. They don't. And these people say, well, I do work with people too, but I just have the studies to back it up and blah, blah, blah. So that's where, you think of like, where do people start? And they get so confused. So they just don't start because there's so much information. That would be that. So for the perimenopause, menopause, if you haven't started strength training, body weight is a great option. That's what I would say. Start there. If you already strength train, make sure it's appropriate and it's not overtaxing, right? You don't need to do it 5 days a week. You are not, unless you're going to be a bodybuilder. And even then, I hope you're working with an appropriate bodybuilding coach. But just starting somewhere, focusing on getting stronger, and then having the nutrition to support that. Now, nutrition wise, we need to make sure we're eating enough, right? That's usually a big thing, especially for like the busy. Most women I work with are busy, right? So just making sure we're having our meals throughout the day, not skipping meals, not skipping and making up for them. Scraping. Anyway, so nutrition, so focusing on protein. Now again, there's this whole debate of like protein's been like the new diet thing. It's just so much for the average person. And I feel so bad for y'all because I feel like our industry is doing such a disservice because so many people are missing the mark, but it's because of what we're shoving at you guys, or gals. So just have a palm size portion of protein at every meal. Start there. If you don't know how to start there, that's where I say it's just invest in a coach. And I know I say that in every video, but I can't tell you how instrumental and how beneficial it is as someone who has worked with a coach myself, or coaches myself, and someone who coaches people myself. Um, then make sure you're eating enough. If you have a fear of eating more, then we've got to work on that. Make sure you're having colors. So colors are fiber. And that's one thing that I really emphasize with clients because more likely than not, the average American diet, we are not getting enough fiber. Um, Now there are things that say a Mediterranean style diet is the most beneficial overall. But there are some discrepancies as far as that study goes because the Mediterranean is a whole area and they only looked at a couple countries. So really that's where I say have your protein, have your fiber, have your colors more so, drink enough water, and then we'll go from there, right? Those are your basic foundations. Um, so thinking of that, okay, so we've got the exercise portion, the nutrition portion, and even from there, it's a very individual level, right? So if I have a gal, let's put her at 45. She's done having kids. Kids are a little bit older. She's starting to go through perimenopause. So her periods are irregular. Maybe she's getting some hot flashes, having trouble sleeping. Maybe feels a little bit more irritable or mood swings. The first thing I'm going to do is say, are you working with somebody that like specializes in hormones? And if they say no, I'm going to make a recommendation for that. If they say yes, then great, that's covered. Okay, now I can do my thing. If they say no and I'm not interested, I can say, okay, here's the dials that I can take care of and help support you through. But at some point, there needs to be a higher level of care that, like, I don't prescribe estrogen or progesterone. I just know that it's hormone replacement therapy, but now they're starting to call it menopause replacement therapy, so MRT, whatever. I just know that that can be beneficial for some people, and it's not a one size fits all. I also say, unless your OBGYN very specializes in women's hormones, then you need to see someone specifically who's a hormone specialist. I just find that a lot of times in feedback from clients is that they go to the OBGYN, maybe they get blood work, maybe they don't. The OBGYN kind of just gives them a general thing and then says, well, that's the best we can do if they are not feeling better. And I find that very unfortunate. We all need to do better in our professions, and that's one area that I see from my perspective that OBGYNs can do better. Now, so going into that, because those hormones are also going to help kind of manage your weight. They're going to help manage your muscle, manage your bones. Excuse me. So keeping the kind of that in your back pocket there. So thinking of what happens from pregnancy to perimenopause and what you're more likely to, I don't want to say contract like it's a disease, but experience. So one of my biggest things is gestational diabetes. If you've had gestational diabetes, studies actually show there were kind of pre-warnings for that. before pregnancy. So that's why with my clients, I really emphasize get some blood work done, but also make sure your A1C is included in that because your A1C is a kind of a average look at what's been happening. So if it's high or abnormal, chances are we might have gestational diabetes during pregnancy. It doesn't always mean we will for sure, but it's kind of that canary in the coal mine. It's a pink flag, as I like to say, not a red flag, but a pink flag. And those are things that we can do prior to pregnancy that can help focus on pregnancy and hopefully not having gestational diabetes. But say we do, you are more likely to have type 2 diabetes after pregnancy and postpartum and perimenopause if you've had gestational diabetes during pregnancy. So that's something I think a lot of people, they go through pregnancy, great, you don't have this anymore. And it's like, yeah, but now you're at a higher risk of having it later in life. Same thing with anxiety and depression. Like if you had that, like thinking of the perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, if you have those are more likely to accumulate and happen during perimenopause and menopause. So very important that you're aware of this. And this is one of my clients, she's actually experiencing this of like, I didn't know that my depression that's happened throughout my life could be so much worse in this period of the perimenopause, menopause era. And symptoms can be exacerbated, they can be worsened. And then you think of that on top of that, going back to, postpartum sleep issues. Now you're struggling having sleep. And think of the cascade of effects of that. You don't want to eat, your hunger signals are off, you're ravenous too, you're fatigued where you don't even want to eat. And then so now we're just creating this bigger disconnect to our body. And so thinking of, okay, if you're aware of that, you're doing what you can with the strength training, right? So focusing on that. So even 1 day a week of strength training is great. And I know I'm kind of bouncing around a lot right now, but it's just, this is a conversation meant to be had. And I don't think enough people are having the realistic conversation. They're just saying, here's hormones, here, do this, here, do that. And I'm saying they all kind of intertwine. So this is where you taking care of the strength training aspect, the nutrition aspect is all going to work in your favor because if you've got those down, then as the hormones fluctuate or just deplete or kind of cause chaos, right? Those things that you can control are there. Now, you might have to change your perspective of exercise if you're feeling fatigued, run down, overworked, and just tired and don't have any energy. And honestly, food is just not feeling well. Like, we have to change our perspective of exercise. And maybe it's thinking, and granted, this is coming from just like a overview, not a like what I would actually like have a conversation about, but thinking of the gratitude we have to move our body and the foundations that we put in place beforehand, wonderful. So now knowing this phase of life, like I'm not necessarily focusing on strength, I'm just focusing on consistency so I can stay kind of in that happy place of going to the gym. That way, when I do feel better, I don't have to restart. I don't have to find my like why again or the time again. Like I've already kept the time in there. Nutrition wise, important to just continue to eat. If you don't feel like eating, maybe it's making a smoothie, maybe making oatmeal, maybe an acai bowl. Thinking of different ways to incorporate food and making things more calorie dense. So maybe instead of chicken breast, we do chicken thighs, right? So now we're getting that fat and protein, but also a more calorically dense thing. So we're still getting our calories that we need without sacrificing bone loss, muscle loss, going back to that. Now, so we've talked about gestational diabetes, anxiety, depression coming up. We can also talk about thyroid issues. So if we've had thyroid issues before, we're more likely to experience those in perimenopause and menopause as well. So it's really important that we're continuing to check on these things with like full panel blood work, but also like if your labs show it's normal, but you don't feel normal, you need to find a doctor that recognizes that. And I think we've all been there of like, yeah, everything like I have a roof over my head, there's food in my pantry, and I have a healthy like body, but I just don't feel normal. And that means we need to dive deeper, and maybe there's something else going on. But if you went to a doctor and said that, they'd be like, well, then, maybe just ride it out. Like that's not an acceptable answer. Um, so now thinking of if you had irregular cycles before, we're going to have irregular cycles again. Really tracking cycle can be beneficial. I'm a big proponent of that, not only because it helps with when to actually conceive, but also when to maybe avoid getting pregnant so early postpartum or to have another baby, but also making sure like if you know your cycles are starting to get irregular, there's a difference between going, man, my period came 22 days ago and now it's coming like 42 days, but I don't know, maybe this month it'll come 30. Like to have that data is very beneficial. So if you know all of a sudden your cycles have changed in duration, then that's again, a pink flag that something is going on. Changes in your sex drive is another thing. Thinking of now what's happening internally that I can't necessarily see, but ways I can track that. Now, there are an immense amount of data that you can try and track your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, your body temperature, and then just when you get your ovulation or period. If that feels overwhelming for you, yeah, it is. So you can choose one. Maybe it is you just track when you get your period in your phone and start there. If you need to take a higher level of care, then you go from there. So it's just thinking of what all these things kind of lead up to. Um, and we need to make sure that we are, again, taking care of ourselves at this point. Another thing that is something to look out for is the incidence of pelvic dysfunction, right? So thinking of if you've had urinary incontinence, you're more likely to experience that in perimenopause and menopause. And that's just because of the drop in not just, but one of the reasons can be because of the drop in estrogen that you experience. So focusing on like, okay, if I can take care of my pelvic floor before, during, and after pregnancy, that already gives me some tools to help with that in the perimenopause era. Migraines is another one of just thinking of the hormonal fluctuations. So those might intensify during perimenopause. Now, sensitivity to like caffeine or alcohol, thinking of that, like there's been several of my clients who they drank before and then postpartum, they're like, oh my God, I just can't do that anymore. And then we get in perimenopause and it's like, oh, I can't even have a drink without feeling so fatigued and down for the day. So um, I know, again, like I said, this was all over the place, but I did want to just open the conversation that if you experience things before, they might happen again. But also to answer the question that I had gotten was strength training is one of the utmost important things that you can do as a woman, not even aesthetically, but just physically and like physically as far as strength and keeping your muscle mass as much as you can. It's really good for your bones and your joints. Nutritionally, we want to make sure we're eating enough, focusing on protein and colors, like I like to say. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have treats. It doesn't mean you can't have dessert. Just make sure, like, am I having like a full spectrum throughout the day of hitting my goals? And then, yes, I can have the dessert. If I choose to have the dessert, like, then did I have enough protein? If not, maybe I have a protein snack. And then I ask myself, do I still want the dessert? Now, that's stuff we all get in coaching, but um, it's really important to say like there is a lot of flexibility, there is a lot of individuality here, but and so I know like my answers are not, you should do 3 days a week of this, of this, of this. But if I was going to make it simple for a client, I would say 3 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week of full body strength training. And that could be body weight or it could be adjustables, dumbbells, resistance bands, like I talked about. Making sure you're eating enough. How do you know you're eating enough? You need to do a food audit, it's called. So maybe that is writing down what you had throughout the day and like keeping a food journal and just assessing like, was I full after these meals or did I feel hungry? Am I skipping any meals? Did I skip breakfast is the big one that I see. We need to be having breakfast. Um, if you want more information, like that's where I would say hire a coach, one that can work with you one to one, or look at Stacy Sims, Gabrielle Lyon, Jordan Saya, and then who's the other guy that is like now looking into it? Oh man, I forget his name. He does a lot of research out of Florida, of course. Um, but I mean, there's tons of people, but I would find somebody that's reputable, not some influencer. And I realize that they're all influencers as well as I say that out loud. But it's just, it's one of those things of it's so important that you find the support that is well educated and has worked with people in this. Like I said, my population is usually from conception to postpartum plus, but I've helped clients from their 20s to their 80s, right? And a lot of the things that I do with postpartum is similar to how I treat my perimenopause, menopause clients as well. But again, those mindset things to be aware of my body's changing. I don't like the way I look. I feel like I'm gaining more abdominal fat. I feel like I'm always stressed. I'm not sleeping well. Like those are common things that happen throughout those phases. And so sometimes that coaching does apply to multiple aspects, but every individual, like your sleep schedule might look different from me to you to somebody else. Um, so I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, be sure to send it to somebody that you also think would benefit from it. If you have questions, just let me know. And then I'll see you on the next ones.